You ready?
Yes, we're good to go. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have Councilor Avery on the call? Okay. Welcome. Okay. We're ready to begin then. I'll call the meeting to order. And first item of business is conflict of interest, pecuniary interest. Is there anything on today's agenda that gives rise to conflict or pecuniary interest for any members of council? If so, indicate. There's no indication of anything coming to rise on today's agenda that give rise to conflict or pecuniary interest. So the minutes will note same. And item number 2 is the agenda. We have the agenda before us. Anybody care to make a motion to adopt the agenda? Councilor Simpson moves. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. Councilor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Simpson, Lloyd, and myself are in favor. Well, I guess there was a need to amend the agenda to delete item 13.2. 13.2 won't be on the agenda. So I just see that note here. So would you consider that amendment as friendly, Councilor Simpson?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay. And does anybody have any objection to that? I see none. Okay. All right, and then we have the council meeting minutes of March the 22nd. They've been circulated. You find those to be in order? If they're in order, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the Councilor Holm. You move the minutes as circulated?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's 7 in favor. So Councilor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Simpson, Lloyd, and myself are in favor of that. And it's 5:05. So we'll attend to item number 6, which is a public hearing on land rezoning bylaw 804 P-03-21. And we can entertain second and third readings today after the public hearing. And so this is for property by Highway 3. So Spencer Croyle will talk to us. So I will call the meeting to order. And as chair, this is a public hearing and all questions and comments will be directed through me. Council is a hear and listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is subject to this hearing. This is a formal hearing and not a debate. Anybody wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once in a matter as called on by myself. Each presenter must state their name, address, and their interest in the matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given an opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a reasonable time frame and limit their discussion to their presentation. And if new material matters are provided, you may be required to email a copy to the legislative coordinator. So I will call upon our designated staff, being Spencer Croyle, to open the topic, please. Spencer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to you and council. Very quickly, as a matter of process, I just want to make sure I'm coming through loud and clear. Perfect, thank you. So as you've already mentioned, this is a public hearing for land use rezoning bylaw 804-P-03-21. And this is a result of an application that's been made to redesignate the lands in question that are legally described as Lot 4, Plan 91125556 from the current zoning of industry to highway commercial. First reading on this bylaw was granted at the March 22nd meeting of council. And sorry, just a moment here. Multiple screens makes it tricky sometimes. We'll just get recentered here. A descriptive narrative has been provided by the applicants indicating that without specifying a certain type of use that they have in mind for development in the immediate future, the intent behind the application to rezone this particular property is primarily focused on the fact that it is proximate to and within a few hundred meters of Highways 3 and Highway 845 in an area that is an area of transition with commercial, industrial, and some residential uses in the immediate surrounding areas. So there have been no requests for anyone to speak as far as I understand up to this point. Those requests would have come through to our legislative coordinator. So I might just ask Lana if she's received any requests that I'm unaware of for anyone to speak on behalf of this item.
I have not, no.
Perfect, thank you. In terms of stakeholder engagement, the item was advertised for 2 consecutive weeks leading up to this evening's meeting. And it was also by way of a pilot program released on our Let's Connect Coaldale.ca public engagement webpage. That's a platform that will be discussed in a little more detail with bylaw 805 and that public hearing. But in the essence of time, I'll just mention that we did field a couple of questions through that platform regarding this bylaw that were focused on whether there's a knowledge of whether a particular use is going to be developed on this site. And as I've already mentioned, the short answer is the applicant has not indicated a particular use and is simply just looking at the most appropriate zoning for the parcel, which they believe to be highway commercial, given the proximity of the site to the highways that run through Coaldale. On that note, I'll just mention as well that at the first reading, there was discussion around a historic environmental contamination consideration because there used to be a fertilizer use there 20 plus years ago. There is knowledge of some contamination on site. The applicants are aware of this, and they're also aware that there will be a requirement for a phase 2 environmental site assessment to be undertaken as a part of a development permit application that would follow this rezoning if the rezoning is to be approved. So that part of things is a part of the process, but not actively pursued at this time. That concludes my comments on the matter, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that council may have at this time.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. And at this time, I'll open the floor to council that may feel free to ask any questions if they wish. I don't see anybody wishing. Oh, Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Spencer. Is there any other form of designation so that it would cover both commercial and industrial in case all of a sudden there is a different use that comes to these new owners and they do decide to change it to industrial again? Do we have to go through the same process again, or is there a way of fast tracking that?
Certainly, through to Councillor Holm, excellent question. The short answer is some parts of our land use zoning processes in the province of Alberta are what you might consider painful in terms of process. And one of the ways that that can be painful is that, yes, if they did have highway commercial designated for the site this evening by way of passing this bylaw, and then all of a sudden there's a desire for an industrial use in the future, they would have to go through this process again to rezone it. The only hybrid zoning that would fit this site, as far as I understand the general desires of the applicants, would be light industrial, which is a zoning that we have within our bylaw. However, ultimately, it's a decision of the applicants as to whether they wanted to go with highway commercial or light industrial. And at this point in time, they've indicated they wanted to continue forward with highway commercial as their desired zoning.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay, Spencer, was that a question, Councillor Chapman, or can you go ahead?
Thank you, Worship. Just through to Spencer, just along with Councillor Holmes' question, with any upcoming applications, then they would still have to follow due process and satisfy the development office in terms of the phases that might be incurred there in the contamination issues that would be applied.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, thank you for the question. The short answer is yes, absolutely. And I can elaborate just a little bit to indicate that there also may be some need for transportation impact considerations, depending on the type of use that they might identify specifically for the site when they do decide to move forward with the development of one kind or another. And that would also be captured in the development permit process. So whatever it is that they want to pursue in terms of actual tangible development on site, as long as it is listed in the permitted or discretionary uses list for the zoning, they'll proceed through the set process that we have for that type of application as per the land use bylaw.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. And as stated previously, I don't think there's anybody that from the general public that wants to either speak for or against this application. So I'll open the floor one last time to council if they have any more questions. And seeing none, I would suspect council, you can just indicate if you have enough information that we can proceed to a decision later on in the evening if I were to close this public hearing, or do you have any more questions? I think there are no more questions of council, and there's no more information to be sought out at this particular time. So in view of that, I will close this public hearing, and we will entertain this item further in today's agenda. So with that, we have dealt with item 6.1, and then now we have 5:15 is the next, so we're pretty much on time for the next public hearing by my clock here on my computer. So I will go to 6.2, and it is land use rezoning bylaw 805-P-03-21, and council can entertain second and third hearings later tonight. And with that, there have been, I know, people working with our legislative coordinator on joining the queue for speaking on this matter. So that will happen during the course of the public hearing. And so I will open the public hearing at 5:15 here. And my name is Kim Craig, Mayor in Town of Coaldale, and I'm chairing this meeting. All questions and comments shall be directed through myself. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is the subject of tonight's hearing. This is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Everyone wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter, as called upon by myself with coordination with our legislative coordinator, Lana Anthony, and then each presenter must state their full name, address, and their interest in this matter, including whether or not they support or do not support the application. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given an opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a reasonable period of time. I would suggest no longer than 5 minutes for their presentation, and encourage when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points raised by previous speakers if possible. If new presentation materials are provided at today's public hearing, you may be required to email a copy to our legislative coordinator, Lana Anthony. I will now call upon our designated staff. In this instance, it would be Cameron Mills. And Cameron, you can start off tonight's public hearing.
Thank you very much. Council has had the opportunity to peruse the staff report, which is included as part of the agenda package. I have prepared a presentation that I'll pull up on my screen, based and very similar to the one previous to the first reading provided, but especially given the focus and the interest in the community with respect to this particular hearing. We're going to go through some of those points again, just so that everything is clear and on the table. And then, so let me just pull that up real quick here. And so you can see the regular meeting of council presentation on your screen, just to confirm.
Yeah, yes.
That's great. Okay, great. So again, thank you. The following presentation is again based on what was presented at the March 22nd, 2021 council meeting prior to first reading of the bylaw. And the presentation was made at that time. It included information made available to the general public through the town's website and new Let's Connect Coaldale feedback platform. And while I'd prefer to avoid being too redundant, we also need to ensure that this information is covered again tonight. So I'll include that information again in my presentation, though I might move more quickly through some aspects of it. I'll also include some new information based on some of the feedback we've received to date, as well as questions that arose during the last presentation, hopefully provide council and interested members of the public with some insights into the decision to be made on this application. So again, first of all, a few notes on the objective for the presentation. The town of Coaldale is in receipt of a zoning application for a lot legally described as Plan 6576AA, Block 9, Lot 1. And the application is to redistrict from commercial C1 to direct control DC. Current regulations in the town of Coaldale land use bylaw 677-P-04-13 require rezoning to do direct control in order to approve the proposed use, which is a cannabis retail sales facility. While there have been a number of cannabis production facilities approved for construction in Coaldale since cannabis was legalized, this application is the first received by Coaldale since the existing cannabis retail sales regulations were added to the bylaw in December of 2018. Tonight is the public hearing portion of the bylaw. So the applicant has a chance to address council directly, as does the landowner and anyone else who feels impacted by the application. We've also had the chance to circulate the application. We've received some feedback from the community, both in favor and against the proposal. Much of that has been included in the agenda package for this evening, and anything received after that was sent out will simply be presented as part of the public hearing portion this evening by myself. So as council is aware, the application is for the building that's currently owned and occupied by 3G Eatery, which is Shauna and Walter Gomez, who are not the applicants, but who do support the application. The applicant is Bud Supply Group. They're interested in entering into a long-term lease of this space, and that would include substantial tenant improvements to the space to reconfigure the existing restaurant as a retail store. The applicant has indicated that an existing kitchen portion of the building could be reconfigured to allow for a sublet to an interested party who might wish to run a small restaurant with limited seating, or potentially with a focus on pickup and delivery. This is not a requirement of the proposal, but is simply something which they have indicated they're open to, and for which there may be some demand in the community should their proposal be approved. In such an event, Alberta regulations quite clearly require completely separate entrances for such a use as a cannabis retail store. Council should keep in mind that over and above any municipal regulations, there are substantial rules in place governing these types of operations, which are mandated by the provincial government. And the applicant, as an owner of multiple locations, is quite aware of these requirements. The picture on the right side of the screen as was provided by the applicant. That's a rendering of what a potential storefront would look like from the street. Currently, the name supplied on the picture is Coaldale Bud Supply. There's also some consideration for Badlands Bud Supply as potential names for the location. Note that in compliance with provincial requirements, all of the windows in the rendering have screening, which prevents the interior of the store from being visible to the street. Key considerations that should guide the decision on this matter. So cannabis retail sales is a regulated use in the town of Coaldale land use bylaw. It is not expressly prohibited. There was some discussion brought up at the first reading and in some of the public feedback received about the town's position with respect to cannabis retail sales, and perhaps that the town's position was that these types of uses are not allowed in Coaldale. Our position administratively here is that they are allowed, as indicated in the land use bylaw. There's a position that is a position that's supported by a number of legal opinions that were included as part of council's consideration for the regulations when they were being developed in 2018. So, for example, in a circulation developed for the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, Carol Zikuski, who's a lawyer with Reynolds Mirth Richards Farmer LLP, and it's titled "Can a Municipality Prohibit Cannabis Retail Stores?" A section of the opinion states municipalities cannot prohibit or opt out of cannabis retail without risking a legal challenge. Unlike some provinces, Alberta has not included the ability to opt out of retail sales and has amended the Municipal Government Act to require the land use bylaw to be consistent with the Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Act, a bylaw prohibiting retail cannabis sales or bylaws, or which regulate retail cannabis to the point that they become unviable. Unviable businesses are likely not to survive legal challenge. There is a schedule in the land use bylaw, Schedule 14, which guides our decision-making on this issue. And as a direct control requirement is in place, there are measurable standards for separation, which are applied to these measurements and are based fundamentally on public health measures as suggested by Alberta Health Services during the consultation portion leading up to legalization. So council will likely recall that these measures that were put in place are substantially more restrictive than what was set out by municipal affairs as guidance for regulating this type of use as a minimum, and that generally council opted to implement the more restrictive measures on the grounds that a cautious approach to legalization, given the lack of certainty as to what this would ultimately look like, was appropriate. The regulations provide for 3 distinct buffer zones. Council has the authority to waive or modify these setback requirements at their discretion. This fundamentally forms the basis of the application. So it's up to council to decide if such a waiver is warranted. The setbacks listed in the bylaw are 500 meters from another retail cannabis sales location, 300 meters from a school, childcare facility, recreation facility, such as arena, et cetera. 100 meters from a provincial medical facility, which is to say a hospital, a provincially owned medical facility. So that would be the hospital in town. 100 meters from a liquor store or 100 meters from a municipal reserve parcel. And staff notes that the location proposed is not in compliance with all of these restrictions. The application meets requirements 1, 3, and 5, but requires waivers with respect to conditions 2 and 4. So the image shown here shows a 100-meter setback from the parcel in red and a 300-meter setback in blue. The yellow dashed line represents a walk from the location to John Davidson School, which resides within that 300-meter setback. And as the crow flies, measurement is taken from the corner of a property to the corner of another property, then the setbacks from the parcel to John Davidson is approximately 170 meters, which is in excess of the 100 meters typical in most Alberta communities, but is substantially less than the 300 meters outlined in the land use bylaw. And a more functional measurement of the distance taken from the entrance of the facility to the sidewalk outside the entrance of the school, as shown on the dashed line, is a distance of approximately 285 meters. Within the red 100-meter buffer of the property, again, applying that as the crow flies measurement, we're approximately 20 meters from the liquor store in the Ventura hotel building. Applying a functional walking measurement from entrance to entrance, the parcel is about 80 meters. In both cases, there is no visibility from the storefront to either the liquor store or the school. Now, I wanted to provide some information with respect to public input because we did receive some commentary back with respect to what the public's guidance was on this issue. So there was substantial public input involved in the crafting of the regulations which are in place. And the summary of the input that was coming from the community was deeply divided on the broader issue of cannabis legalization and the issues like where retail stores should be located stemming from that legalization. The survey that was prepared was broadly circulated and represents amongst the most robust responses the town has received in terms of public input in recent years. Over 10% of the population at the time responded to the survey, which is quite substantial. And I thought it would be appropriate to provide some key items from that input again for council's consideration tonight, as well as for the public's consideration. So first, with respect to the question of general attitudes in town towards legalization, the town was very split. And in fact, remarkably so, remarkably evenly in terms of both very strong support, both for and strong against legalization, and also very evenly split in terms of moderate support for and moderate support against legalization. So statistically speaking, we can kind of look at this as being an even split on both sides of this issue, which is not a common occurrence when we look for we have these types of surveys. Now, in terms of where in town would be most appropriate for this type of use, public feedback showed a preference for the downtown areas, and with the industrial park being the second choice amongst the general public. So 52% of respondents indicated the Main Street area or the downtown area as being a preference, and 40% indicated the Northeast industrial area was an appropriate location. So and then when we look at the issue of zoning, from a zoning perspective, commercial C1, which is generally the zoning applied to the downtown commercial areas, was indicated as the preference, and direct control was the second most popular option. And ultimately direct control is what was chosen as the appropriate zoning within our regulations. Now, this is a somewhat more technical question than the question of location. Is the difference between one zoning and another, or the difference between direct control zoning and other zonings is not necessarily always going to be perfectly understood by the general public, whereas the location question is generally sort of common language and a simpler concept to understand. Now, in terms of public opinion on setback restrictions, the most common opinion was that the 100-meter setback provided by municipal affairs was appropriate. However, just over half of respondents indicated that the requirements with respect to that 100-meter setback were either somewhat or substantially too lenient. And in terms of types of setbacks that should be in place, public opinion indicated schools, childcare facilities, parks, and libraries were the areas of highest concern, and substantial drop-off from there, with liquor stores and other cannabis facilities being below that 25% of support. So following consideration from the public input and substantial deliberation, council opted to apply fundamentally the recommendations from AHS in order to regulate the location of retail stores in town. So AHS being Alberta Health Services. So direct application of the regulation to generally the downtown of Coaldale provides for the following map. And I do apologize, it's a little bit blurry, but I will explain how it works. Based on these calculations, there's fundamentally two locations in town that meet the complete strict application of the regulations. First, the overflow parking lot currently adjacent to the north of Town Hall at the entrance and exit to the downtown core. And second, the area due north of Custom Auto and directly adjacent to the Campbell Clinic, which is fundamentally surrounded by residential uses and is located on Main Street itself. Neither of these properties have existing commercial leasable space on them at this time. However, both of these properties have been the subject of redevelopment speculation by interested parties in the past few months. We've had people interested in purchasing the overflow parking lot from the town contact myself, and there's also been some speculative development discussions about redevelopment of the commercially zoned locations to the east of the health clinic. So both of these listed locations appear to meet the strict application of the regulations as they're written. However, there's an argument to be made that while they meet the direct application of the regulations, they also aren't necessarily the best locations to meet the intention of the regulations in terms of their potential impacts to community public health. So to compare these sites to the proposed site, I would suggest considering the following. Again, both of these sites are directly adjacent to residential areas. Both of these sites have substantially higher traffic flows of both vehicular and pedestrian traffic. The sites adjacent to the Campbell Clinic are on Main Street itself. The site next to the town office and across from the Campbell Clinic is at the access point to downtown from the highway. Conversely, the site in question is on a one-way street. It does not connect to the highway, sees very little pedestrian or vehicular traffic other than from those people intending to access the businesses on that street. If in fact, council's determination is that the best location for this type of use is downtown, it's difficult to conceptualize a location within downtown that has lower general exposure or less vehicular pedestrian traffic than the proposed location within that downtown overlay. So, and finally, if it's determined that the proposed site is not appropriate, and it's also determined that these other two locations cannot be used to accommodate a cannabis retail sales facility, then the town starts to enter into that regulated to the point of not being a viable business territory as described in the legal opinion. So with that in mind, other relevant considerations, the applicant, which is Bud Supply Group, operates successful retail cannabis sales operations in a number of Southern Alberta communities and is experienced being the first such business in a community where a significant portion of the population might have concerns or reservations pertaining to cannabis retail sales. Current locations for their company would be Lethbridge, multiple locations in Lethbridge, 2 and working on a 3rd, Tabor, Vulcan, Claresholm, Fort Macleod, and Pincher Creek. Letters of support have been provided by the applicant. Attached to their application, those come from the mayor of Pincher Creek, the development officer from Claresholm, as well as a detachment commander from the RCMP and their existing landlord in Lethbridge, who also operates a dental office next to the location. These letters of support demonstrate that the applicant is likely to be a good corporate citizen should the application prove successful. Additionally, the regulatory framework for cannabis retail sales extends beyond the municipality. There are significant regulations in place at the provincial level, which the applicant is better versed in speaking at, in which I expect they will address in their remarks to council. These regulations include measures relating to security to break-ins, for example. The application itself provides council with an opportunity to consider the regulations which were put in place over 2 years ago. Everyone having had the opportunity to live in a world over the past 2 years in which cannabis is legal, and which firsthand knowledge of the impact of these types of operations is possible. We also know that at this time, there are no approved cannabis sales locations in Coaldale. There have been a number of interested inquiries, and I do expect additional applications to come forward to council. However, given that there are no locations in town which fit, well, there are a couple, but there are no with ready leasable space that fit the prescribed setbacks perfectly. No one at this point has been willing to take the risk up until now with respect to the $1,000 application for rezoning. So there are 42 such locations, actually 49, I believe, in Lethbridge that are currently operating, and 2 locations in Tabor. Lethbridge permits this type of use as a permitted use in 6 commercial zonings, and Tabor allows it as a discretionary use in 2 commercial districts. Lastly, council has the opportunity now to consider the application to make a determination on the merits of this particular proposal. And then council can also use that determination to inform future amendments to the land use bylaw if deemed warranted. And a notes to the bylaw itself. The bylaw as it's written provides for all the uses of the commercial C1 zoning. So if the use is in place and then wants to shift or partially shift, for example, to allow for a pizza restaurant in the kitchen portion of the building, for example, rezoning hearing is not then going to be expressly required. This is written this way simply because it's simpler, it's less costly for the business owner, more efficient for staff, and less costly for the town. Additionally, it provides for staff to make a determination on the development permit for the application, given that the use has fundamentally been approved at rezoning. And again, this is about being cheaper and faster and more efficient, requiring another presentation to council to cover what is largely the same issue that we're talking about here. So with that, I will stop my share, turn my video back on. I'd be happy to address any questions, or we can proceed with the rest of the hearing.
Thank you, Cameron. That was very thorough presentation. At this time, I would allow council to direct any questions through to Cameron on his presentation. If there are any, please indicate if you want to direct the question through to Cameron. Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Cameron, those results of the survey that you showed us there, I'm assuming that was from the 2018 survey that was put out?
Yeah, that comes from the the survey that was used to inform, and I'm sorry, I was trying to be clear in my presentation. That's from the survey that was used to inform the crafting of the regulations initially.
Okay, so that is 3-year-old data. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that question. Any other members of council wish to address the question through the cam? Okay, I see none. I will turn things over to Lana and she can introduce who will be presenting. I believe that we have Chase Bennett and Blaine Emelson from the Bud Supply Company that wish to speak. And so which party would like to address council first?
I definitely can. Hi, guys. My name is Chase Bennett. I'm from the Bud Supply Group, and thank you for hearing us today.
You're welcome. And you're the proponent, so you're obviously in favor of the application. So go ahead, the floor is yours.
Correct. Thank you. And I just want to make sure that I can share this okay. And just let me know if that came through.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So starting this off again, thank you very much for hearing us today. My name is Chase Bennett. I'm the CEO for the Bud Supply Group. And on the call as well would be Blaine Emelson. He's our COO. And then Brad Howell is our Chief Operations Officer. So thank you very much again for having us in today. To start it off, the Bud Supply Group, this is a 15-slide document. And it's just going to explain who we are, what we've done, and what we care about. So to start off our story, where did we all start? Bud Supply Group started as an idea between 3 Southern Alberta boys with a passion for cannabis. The idea quickly changed to a reality not long after cannabis legalization with the Bud Supply's flagship location in Lethbridge. As well as myself, to give you guys a basic background of where we're sitting, how we came into this. My background and my experience is in oil and gas. I did regulatory, health and safety, environment. Blaine Emelson is in sales. He has a strong marketing background, and he was been pretty much in sales his whole life. And then our operations manager, Brad Howell, has been in retail for almost 2 decades now. So it's been an adventure so far, and that's kind of where we set it up. And then again, it's from our values to our visual identity. This document outlines who we are and how we are different from our competitors, including our customers, our focus, and what we stand for. And Blaine, do you want to take over?
Yes, thank you, Chase. My name is Blaine Emelson. I'm representing the Bud Supply Group, and the address of our location for head office is 1917 Mayor McGrath Drive South, Unit 20 in Lethbridge, Alberta. And Mr. Mayor, thank you for hearing us today. So I'll be quick and I'll spare you my reading. Just kind of give you the Coles notes. So the first thing you're seeing is our purpose. And really our purpose is to create a comfortable and inviting open atmosphere where people can connect and ask questions. Next slide. Our mission is outlined here, and the 2 things to take note are we put emphasis on community and customer service. We're looking to foster a reputation of being responsible community members, and that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Next slide, Chase. And our vision, as a small startup, we take great pride in the product we offer, and that is the way people perceive us. How you do anything is how you do everything, and we hope to be upstanding citizens in every community in which we operate. Next slide, over to you, Chase.
So as far as milestones to where we've been firstly started up, so in December of 2017, sorry, that's a typo, but we incorporated the Bud Supply Group. From there, in November of 2018, we opened our flagship store in Lethbridge, on the south side of Lethbridge. We were one of the very first to open up in Alberta. In November 2019, we opened up in Pincher Creek for Creek Bud Supply. And then in February, in Claresholm for Range Bud Supply. And then March, we opened up in Tabor for Harvest Bud Supply. And then moving forward, in April of 2020, we opened up our Fort McLeod store. And then in September of 2020, we opened up our Vulcan store, Vulcan Bud Supply. And then coming into this year, we just opened up our north side location here in Lethbridge. And then currently under construction is our west side location on the west side of Lethbridge. And then obviously in the future is kind of see where this kind of goes and how from here. And then visual identity. So what would you expect when you kind of walk into our stores? So the look and feel of Blood Supply stores in general. So on the outside of Blood Supply stores are usually found by our signature color changing sign with a specific store name. And on the inside, walk into a Blood Supply and you'll find a rustic, modern, contemporary aesthetic, clean whites, blend, clean wood to give unique, elegant, and country feel. And as well as all our stores are, it's very well lit. It's clean, very clean lines, and it's definitely not that dark, seedy neon colors. Trying to get rid of that misconception as well. So over to you, Blaine.
One thing you can expect when you walk into a Bud Supply store is to be greeted by someone who's attentive and professional. We really want to break preconceived notions the moment you enter one of our stores. And then the main focus of our bud tenders is to create a connection, to get to know our customers so that we can provide personalized service. Next slide, Jace. So here it just kind of goes over who our customers are, but just a couple points I want to make is we see people from all walks of life, whether they're healthcare workers, construction workers, everyday professionals, but they're people of all ages and demographics, and they're all looking for something unique, whether it's people who are looking for relief with non-intoxicating products such as CBD, which account for about 15% of our sales, or people who are looking for safer access to products that they're already spending their money on, whether they're taking their dollars out of their local community and spending them in places like Tabor and Lethbridge, or they're propping up the illegal illicit market that doesn't have access to safe testing and the checks and balances put in place. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to touch on for our customers. Next slide there, Chase.
So a couple more, or a little bit more information on our customers. So our main customer, we call him the experienced hunter, makes the majority of our customer base. The average age of this customer is 37 years old. These are people who usually have a steady income and value their local community. And obviously there's no minors in store whatsoever. So all customers must be 18 years and older to be allowed in store. All Blood Supply staff required to have ID or required to ID anyone who appears to be under the age of 25, and then failure to implement this age verification could result in a hefty fine to the retailer, as well as any retailer may face suspension or loss of AGLC license. So just to reiterate, like the fines are significant. So compliance is absolutely key in our industry. And then we'll go over some security aspects here. Go ahead, Blaine.
Yeah, so and one thing to note is we do not tolerate anyone providing cannabis to minors either. We have worked with local authorities in our markets and we have banned people that we have caught doing this. So that's one thing to note on that. Moving into security, one thing to say, it's very strict protocols and reporting surrounding the industry just to play the game. So we're more than happy to cooperate with local authorities. Our video system that we have requires 60 days continuous recording with weekly checks. So again, it's very heavily scrutinized. That's all I have for security. Thanks, Chase. Next slide.
So another big contributing portion to this is we're local. It's our home, it's our community. Especially for myself, this definitely hits close to home as well. So I'm currently building in Cottonwood Estates in Coaldale, and I'm using a local building contractor there and hoping to have our house in there by probably the fall of 2021. Management and staff, so currently we have a couple people from our north and one from our south side store that live in Coaldale. They work here in Lethbridge, and as well as one of our managers manages our north side location. She works or she lives in Coaldale as well. So what does it all mean? So we're definitely not a large corporate retail chain with faceless ownership. Our business success is just as important as the positive impact we have on the local community. And it essentially is our community, is our home. So it's something that is going to be near and dear to our heart. And by no means, if there's any issues that arise or anything that goes on with the stores, like you're getting ownership that's directly, it lives a minute or a couple minutes away. So it's definitely important to us.
Yeah, so the extras, something to be noted is we understand that there are risks with the consumption of cannabis, as there are with many choices that we make on a day-to-day basis, whether that to use alcohol, tobacco, drive your car, whatever it may be. But the point I'm trying to make is because of these risks, that's why we choose not to sit on the sidelines when it comes to being a member in our community and giving back. So we're proactive in our efforts to give back, and we're responsible members of the community. We'll join the Chamber of Commerce. We were the first cannabis store to do so in Lethbridge. We were also the first cannabis store to join the Better Business Bureau in Alberta. We have a 5 out of 5 star rating with an A+. So it's just, you know, we're going to be there to do food drives, to help clean up the community, and to look after those who can't themselves. And that's something that is really core to who we are, not just what our business is. That's all I have there. Next slide, Chase.
And as far as just the last little bit here, so thank you very much again for hearing us today and for learning about our company as a whole. It's just the three of us in that picture here that own this company, and we built it from the ground up. So as far as kind of starting it and kind of going into next communities, where it's what we're about, it's what our staff's about, and it's what our businesses we're hoping to be. Blaine, Brad.
Yeah, again, just thank you so much for your time. And in closing, if cannabis is going to be an eventuality in the town of Coaldale, then it's in your favor because we're local. We can be accountable for our operating practices, and we can make actionable change should the community require. Chase lives in Cottonwood.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you again for having us. Sorry to cut you off, Mayor, there. But yeah, I appreciate you guys taking the time to hear us out. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chase, Blaine, and Brad. And at this time, I would ask if there's any members of council that would like to speak. Only if we can end the share screen so I can see all the participants. Thank you very much. So, council, does anybody have any questions through to our delegation presenters? Okay, I don't see any. Councilor Chapman, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And it's great to finally meet you, Chase, and of course, Blaine and Brad, of course, too. Appreciate your attendance today. And of course, having Sean and Walter with us. I'd like to hear some from them too in the future. Where I'm going to speak, what I'm going to speak to is more about the about our zoning, mainly because we've we set up the zoning for specific reasons, and the criteria for that seems like it's well embraced, even though it is very widely split in terms of support for and against. Other municipalities, of course, have similar zoning restrictions or buffer zones, mainly just to sort of control that industry. And as we already know, there has been some consumption in at least one of our schools here in Coaldale. What I'd like to ask you is, and maybe this can be addressed to Cam, if you're going to be keeping the restaurant equipment there, is that so that there would be a second enterprise in there? For example, will there still be a restaurant, or will it be all 100% bud supply? So that would be my question there with regards to that, or if you're going to require a separate entrance.
I believe in Cam's introduction, the law states clearly that you need a separate entrance to restaurant if that was going to be the case. I'm not sure if Chase or Wayne or Brad want to speak to the future possibility of sharing your space. It's up to you.
For sure. So you are correct. We do need a separate entrance into that, so there can't be any conjoining entrances between two businesses through cannabis. But Walter and Sean has gave us the option, I guess, if it was possible, if we wanted to use the entire space. We're most likely just going to keep it separated, but still have the hope if someone's going to come in there. We're kind of live and breathe local aspect of it. So if we can have another business in there, especially on something that might help, traffic coming to our store, we would be gladly take that on for sure.
Any members, Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a couple of questions for you. You've talked about how you've worked with the police in whichever municipality you're in to help combat some of the problems. Have you seen any issues that seem to stick around the stores long term? And the second question is, and this may be a really hard question to answer, but do you know approximately especially out of your Lethbridge stores, if there's a certain percentage of Coaldale residents that are actually using them? Like if you would say, like, I know that's probably a really hard question, but maybe 5 or 20 or, you know.
Yeah, you betcha. So I'll let Blaine answer the second one as far as the where the residents are coming in. But when you mean lingering issues, like, can you just expand a little bit for me?
You guys had just spoken earlier about some that you worked with police, and in our case, it would be RCMP. So, and I was just kind of wondering what exactly were you working with? What were the issues that came from it? And do you find that there are issues that seem to always be around the cannabis stores?
As far as working with local authorities and such, is mainly basically gone on for us helping them out, or if we had an issue in store. So we've had a couple officers come in store and ask if we had seen any of these people, or if we could catch them on the camera if they came in frequent. We have a membership program that we have with our company, and we've referenced that a couple times to see when the last time that person's come in, if they were under our membership program or not, and as well as video as well. So the type of video that we have to have through the provincial government has to be high definition. We have to have significant amount of recording. We actually signed up with our own company to do pretty much forever recording on a cloud. So it's always something that we have in store as well. But the main aspect, we haven't really seen anyone coming in or lingering issues. We've actually phoned the RCMP or the city police when people have been booting for other people, just for the same way as liquor. We can't. We are tied to that in full. So like the fines are very, very steep with the AGLC. And then as well is just restringent requirements. Everything's on camera. If there's a power outage, we got to record it. There's absolutely everything. So we haven't had really any lingering issues. There's been a couple of our locations that we do have parking concerns just because of where it was situated, but in Coaldale, that's not a concern whatsoever. And then just using Google Analytics, our average customer spends roughly around 5 to 10 minutes in store. So it's kind of a quick in and out. But yeah, so we haven't really seen anything potential. And Blaine, I guess, or Brad, do you guys want to jump in if I missed anything?
Mainly what we've had is, other things happen around the location. Like we had a car get the tail light smashed and the police used our video to apprehend that person. A TELUS box was hid in an alley. Our camera was able to catch the make and model of that vehicle, just little things along those lines. Police officers are, in all respects, inspectors in the AGLC world. So we have to basically treat them as such. So they have full access to walk through the building, to view all of our camera recordings. And, we just feel like the more we can cooperate, the better it's going to be for everybody, including the industry. And then with respect to customers who are shopping at our stores, just one thing, like there is not a store in Coaldale, and it is obvious that people do use cannabis. There is a certain percentage of the population. So, by default, those people are spending their money either in Lethbridge or a place like Tabor.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Simpson? Okay, I see Councillor Lloyd has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. But this is probably more for Shauna and Walter, but I'm not clear. Are they staying there, or are you getting another, trying to appeal for another restaurant to come in there? Just not clear as to what's going to happen with the 3G actually.
Hello, thank you. We haven't decided what we're going to do in the near future here, but leasing the building out gives us an opportunity to
kind of explore more options. When we speak, we'll speak on that when it's our turn to speak as well.
Okay, thank you. I'd really hate to see you go. I've really appreciated you in town and being able to have meetings and meet with friends. It's been great. Hope you stay.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate the support and the love. We really, really do.
Okay, any other members of council with, Councillor Holm, you have a question?
Just pretty simple. I'm assuming that your hours of operation are regulated by Alberta Liquor and Gaming? And are they flexible or depending on which community you're in?
That is correct. So right now our stipulated hours are we cannot open before 10 a.m. and we cannot be closed past 2 a.m. But in my opinion, nothing good happens after midnight. And when it comes to a cannabis retail store in a small town, we consider midnight 8 p.m. That's what time we'll be closing our stores.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman, you have one last question?
Yeah, thanks. Last question here. Chase, are you okay with the direct control zoning that we're planning on implementing? And my second question is with regards to the downtown. I believe that being a commercial, there are recommendations that, especially from the RCMP, that recommend that a commercial area be more appropriate for this type of venue.
I guess Spencer or Cameron can speak to the direct control, but currently under our land use bylaw, direct control is the only methodology for a cannabis retailer to enter the market in Coaldale. So
Yeah, thank you. I can address that. So with respect to direct control is a funny district because we write sort of an independent bylaw for each direct control application that comes through. So the way we've written this particular direct control bylaw is fundamentally that if it's approved, and this is only, of course, if council approves it as it's written, but it fundamentally looks exactly the same as the existing zoning that's in place, but then it also adds for the possibility of this use. So basically the way this one is worded is it says, yeah, we understand that everything that's there or potentially there now is fine. And we're saying that for this particular building, we're also saying that cannabis retail sales is fine, if you will. So that's the way that is addressed. The second part, sorry, what was the second part of the question, Bill?
More just operational, that it be the commercial sector as recommended by the RCMP.
Yes, thank you. And I had meant to address that in my presentation, but one of the, when we showed the map with so we showed the downtown overlay map, basically because when we look at this, when we look at the public input we received, and technically the direct control zoning could be applied anywhere in town. But when we looked at the map, we said, okay, let's look at the downtown overlay. And the reason for that is to showcase that the downtown is relatively small. It's dominated by a single street, that sort of thing. But technically speaking, with respect to some of these setback requirements, there are a number of spots in the industrial park, for example, that would meet the requirements of those setbacks. But the feedback from the general public and especially from the RCMP at the time of our public consultation was that the industrial park would be fundamentally a bad idea. So, less traffic, less people, the opportunity for, more opportunity for break-ins and things like that. So for that reason, when we looked at this, so we said really downtown is what we're hearing from the broader group of input as being the appropriate place to then apply that direct control zoning. So that's the standpoint we've taken administratively.
okay, council, any more questions to Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a question towards Cam. So by that new system that we have, I noticed there was some feedback from it. And I don't believe we got any other letters or anything. Was it just that? And just from reading comments and from reading the results from that, I found it, maybe I'm kind of like the percentage seemed to be higher in favor, but it was such a low number of people too. So it's not one to really go by, but
yeah, it's a good question. Certainly the responses that were found in that particular app did gravitate towards support for the application, absolutely. That could be interpreted any number of ways. You could interpret the lower amount of feedback as potentially people having less strong opinions on the subject than they had, because one of the things that was astounding from the initial round of feedback was that it was the very high number of very strong support and the very high number of very strong against, right? So that may have mitigated, but I mean, that's obviously pure speculation. I did receive 2 letters, and when the mayor opens those up, I will present those. I received those today, so they didn't have the opportunity to get into the agenda package, so I'll provide those as well.
Is that good? You have a follow-up, Councillor Simpson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So with all the improvements that would be needed on the building, how long would it be if it was approved until you guys were open?
I'll let Blaine answer this because I generally like to get open as soon as we possibly can, and they have to kind of reel me in a bit. So I'll let Blaine answer.
Yes, Chase is very efficient, very good at his job. So looking at our timeline, we would be aiming for a September open date. So typically a build out takes us anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, depending on supplies. We typically have everything needed for a store ordered in advance, because our goal is to open 4 per year until 4 isn't enough anymore. And yeah, typically that means we need to open 1 a quarter. We have our expansion process pretty well dialed in, and that is largely a thanks to Brad there. So does that answer your question?
Okay, so unless there's any last call for questions from council to either Chase, Blaine, or Brad. Okay, I see none. Lana, knowing who's up next, do we have anybody in the gallery waiting room that wants to speak against the application?
No, Mayor, there is nobody.
Okay, so then can you queue up the next people that want to speak in favor of the application?
Yes, Mayor. Shauna and Walter Gomez are on the call as well, and they would like to speak to the matter.
Okay, I'd like to welcome Shauna and Walter Gomez to the Zoom meeting then. Welcome, Shauna and Walter, and you can have a few minutes to speak in favor of the application. And your address in, if you could state that for us, please, that would be good.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, our address is 1908 18th Street at the restaurant. So we're speaking in favor. We just kind of wanted to thank you guys for hearing us out, letting us have a say. We know that COVID has kind of been rough on everybody this year, and it's been really rough on restaurants, really hard for us as a family, and restaurants are never really a conducive business to be raising small children in. It's always been hard for us, and this year has really, really pushed our limits and made it really difficult for us. And we had started out looking into things, and I had gone to CAM with this idea. We had kind of talked about it with people we knew, and it had come up in conversation and kind of jokingly to start out with, and then it got a little more serious, and I brought it up to Cam, which got this ball rolling, which introduced us to Chase, which has kind of been a huge blessing for us. And it's been a hard year, and our kids have been struggling, and we've been struggling. So for us, this is kind of an opportunity for us to take some time to get our feet under us and regroup as a family, regroup as a business. And with Chase saying, we've given them the opportunity to take the whole building, and they've kind of said that they're more than happy to leave that restaurant equipment in there. And it gives us the opportunity that if we don't decide to stay right now, we have the choice to come back in 6 months or a year or 2 years, or whenever we decide that that's what we can do again, and it's not going to affect our family and our children so harshly, that opens up a lot of time for us to be able to kind of regather and get our feet under us again. So for us, this is a big opportunity to take this time to breathe and regroup. So yeah, that's what I needed to say.
I think that sums it up for our decision to support this.
Yeah,
So
So
thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Chase, and everybody for understanding and hearing us out as well. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Is there any questions of council to either Walter or Shauna? We certainly appreciate your struggles in the global pandemic and can certainly empathize with what impact it's had. So it's you're a good retailer service provider in Coaldale, and we appreciate that. It's a hard choice to maybe step away from that for the time being. I don't see any questions. Is there another person that wants to speak, Lana?
No, that's all I have. Pam does have a couple of letters to read out as well that were received after the agenda was printed.
Hey, Cam, I'll open the floor to you to introduce those letters.
Thank you. Lana, is it okay, because I'm going to be reading, is it okay if I leave my camera off? Just kind of awkward for me to have the camera on while I'm reading.
Sure.
Fine. Okay. So yes, thank you. I do have two letters to read. I'll start with one from, we had some correspondence from Maureen Remus, who's a resident in town. Initially, Maureen had just emailed me with some questions. And so in order to understand the last one, I'm just going to read the email chain, as it were, so you can get a full picture. So on Wednesday, April 7th, 12:05 p.m., Maureen Remus wrote and said, "Dear Cameron, I'm writing regarding the rezoning of the property downtown for the purpose of marijuana sales. Who is it that owns the building in question? The information does not seem to appear on the documents on the website, but I could have missed it. Also, is town council unanimous in support regarding the rezoning to allow for marijuana sales? And finally, has the town looked at the scientific evidence for the adverse effects of marijuana use?" And thank you sincerely, Maureen Remus. And Maureen did also contribute via the Let's Connect Coaldale app, I'll point out as well. So I responded at 12:19 p.m. Said, "Hi, Maureen, thanks for your email. Your input on this is appreciated, and I'll do my best to respond to your questions. The building is owned by the operators of the restaurant currently located at the building. They're not the applicant in this case, but have indicated their support for the application. The applicant would lease the space from the current owners who are seeking a change for the space. Town council has not made any decision on their support for this application or not. They will make a decision on the application following consideration of evidence presented at the public hearing, which is taking place this coming Monday. I believe you've provided input on the application by way of the Let's Connect Coaldale app. This will be provided to council prior to their decision. If you'd like to provide a letter for council's consideration, you're certainly welcome to do so. If you'd like to speak at the hearing, you can make an appointment to do so, as the hearing is held virtually using the Zoom platform. As for the effects of use, we did engage in 6+ months of review, along with substantial public consultation, as well as direct consultation with the RCMP and Alberta Health Services during the period leading up to legalization in 2018. Council used that information to guide the creation of regulations on this matter, which were adopted in December 2018. Council took all that input very seriously, and as a result, Coaldale has regulations which are far stricter than what is common in other municipalities, including Taber and Lethbridge. With that said, Coaldale is not in a position to make a decision on whether or not cannabis use or sales should be generally accepted or not. That was a decision made by the federal government in Ottawa and is beyond the purview of any municipal council, including Coaldale. Council is simply considering at this juncture whether or not to approve the application from this particular applicant at this particular location. I hope that provides some clarity. I'm actually on vacation today, but if you want to discuss the matter further, so on and so forth. And then today, did receive today from Ms. Remus. "Dear Cameron, thank you for your message. If the criteria of council to rezone is not to decide whether marijuana should be sold or not at this particular location, then what is the criteria for rezoning? What criteria come into play when deciding on approving the application? I'm perfectly aware of the federal government legislation. However, because a law has passed does not necessarily mean it's good for society. It would be helpful if council and the staff of the town of Coaldale halted a blind acceptance of the legalization of marijuana and started asking the hard questions. But then again, we all know it's all about money. You may use my comments in this email for the meeting tonight. And sincerely, Maureen Remus." So that is the correspondence received from Ms. Remus. And I'll just proceed to the next one. We received the following correspondence today from signed by the 5 medical practitioners, 5 doctors, I believe, over at the Campbell Clinic. So to Coaldale Mayor and Town Council regarding proposed bylaw 805-P-03-21. This letter is to provide feedback on the proposed rezoning bylaw change pertaining to cannabis retail in Coaldale in the downtown core. We have several concerns related to the proposed waiving of some key points in the existing bylaw and feel that proceeding with these changes may have unforeseen consequences, including potential harm to individuals, families, and children. We're in no way challenging the decriminalization of medical or marijuana or a role for medical marijuana, though both are very serious, far from settled topics we have a lot of experience with. We do not wish to debate them here. We do emphasize the established grave concerns with use of any cannabis product in the less than 25 years age group. Firstly, the existing bylaw presumably exists for a reason, i.e. reflecting values that citizens of Coaldale have, or at least had. Is council certain that these values have changed to this extent? The current bylaw, it seems, was a compromise of sorts to allow for cannabis retail with carefully regulated zoning to oversee the impact of said businesses and all attendant activities. Limiting locations away from the downtown core and busy municipal centers seemed to be the primary purpose. The prima facie intent of the proposed direct control rezoning is entirely contrary to the existing bylaw. Secondly, our concern is as physicians with a medical practice very nearby, the proposed location, namely that our patients and their families will be in close proximity to this retail outlet and the attendant activities. Though our medical office is not a provincially run medical clinic, we are provincially accredited, and we do without doubt represent the busiest medical treatment facility in the community by way of traffic flow. Indeed, we represent one of the busiest locations in town. As mentioned, this includes children and families. Further, this proposed location is indeed in close proximity to the downtown core, the future municipal office building, several other liquor establishments, a dance studio, a public library, the busy highway thoroughfare with full exposure to said highway, a dental office, a chiropractor, and an optometrist. Lastly, our concern is that waiving these provisions of the existing bylaw very well could expose council to future challenges of a rather arbitrary nature. This could be both the aforementioned bylaw as well as many other, perhaps any. Has council really considered these implications? Bylaws in their detail exist for a reason, and this is both to govern and also to assist and protect those who are governing in the decision making. Once portions are arbitrarily waived, what will stop any future such challenge? We urge council to reconsider this proposed change. We feel that the existing bylaw is well conceived and draws heavily from the wisdom of other jurisdictions and the safety of their cumulative experience. It also seems to accurately reflect our community values, which we entirely agree professionally. We're certainly not challenging the legality of said retail establishment, but are rather questioning the wisdom of locating it in this location so close to the very core of our downtown, including our family care clinic. Signed by Stephen Lowe, Jeffrey Steed, Minem, I believe Booley, Johan Meyer, and E. Mueller.
Okay, thank you, Cam. Are there any more written submissions?
That is all of them.
Okay. And I guess typically, if this was a public meeting, I would allow the proponents to address any of the items brought up if you wanted to, or if either Chase or Brad or Blaine wish to respond to any of the written submissions. I'll open the floor to you for that opportunity. Chase?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess to the first one, like I guess I looked at more, that's a personal belief rather than anything, so I won't really comment on that one. As far as the concerns from the Campbell Clinic, I definitely can sympathize with those concerns, but just to reiterate on, it's a general misconception that we're going to bring additional criminal activity, or if there's any complications from our business opening up. I think that's represented in the type of references that we actually were able to procure. I look at the town of Pincher Creek to being very similar to the town of Coaldale. It was very similar as far as public perception, whether it was for and against, and for what we were able to do in that community, and how that community views us right now is it's something that me, Brad, and Blaine can be proud of. So, you know, from the RCMP giving us a letter of recommendation there to each one of our landlords as well. We just don't really have that any really reasoning or foundation behind the misconceptions that if we did open up, they're putting in children and families at risk. That's obviously not the case. And as well as you're going to find us in store, you're going to find us around. We're going to be a big part of the community. We have give you an example. We have a community cleanup on this Sunday. We put on our t-shirts, and then we get out in the community and we start cleaning up. And it's something that we don't want to hide. We're not going to be in the dark alleys, I guess you could say, of any town that we're going to be in. We want to change those misconceptions. We want to be at the forefront of the industry, and then gradually are passing along as much education, as much knowledge as we can. Blaine, Brad, you guys want to comment anything there too?
Just a couple logistical things to point out. So the regulation of how cannabis is transported is very strict. It needs to be outside of arm's reach of the driver. Nobody else in the vehicle can be consuming cannabis in a moving vehicle. And being that, most of our customers are stop and go type customers, and that we only see them for 10 minutes on average, which that data is right on Google. It can be looked up by anyone. And it looks like we are quite close to where the RCMP is right now. And I would expect that would, deter our customers from wanting to linger in the area. So that's all I have to say on that.
So, okay, Brad?
Yeah, no, just to touch on, the comment about having families and stuff. I'm a young father of 3. I've got 2 young children under 3 years old. I've got a 14-year-old. And, they have never been kind of put into any kind of situation where they might be talked about or looking at it differently, other than it's, like somebody having a beer, no different. Obviously, it's not for kids to be consuming, and my oldest son has obviously talked about that, where he knows that this is not for kids to be, and that's going to be a choice that people, whether they're children or adult, will choose. But on our end, we make sure that we give the knowledge and the information of why he shouldn't be, not just you can't do it because you're a kid. It's because your brain isn't functioned, or full growth, I should say. So that's why they, under 25 is, ideal. But at the end of the day, we're there to make sure that that information is given out to everybody, not just, trying to hide it, like Chase and Blaine have been saying.
So the letter from the Campbell Clinic in particular, I know that they bring up a lot of proximity issues relative to the liquor store and identifiable healthcare delivery clinic type thing. So you listed out a number of locations that you currently have stores, and you have the same proximity issues. Are you close to doctor, dentist clinics, dance studios, liquor stores in any or all of your other stores, and have they presented any issues or challenges as far as you're aware?
To date, we have not received one negative comment from any of the neighborhoods we've been in, from any of the businesses that are locally around us as well. Our landlord in Lethbridge South here, he's actually owns Cool Dental. So he is obviously a dental clinic there. In that same parking lot, or across the parking lot, there's a chiropractor. I think there is it's a chiropractor, sorry. And then there is a pharmacy there as well. On our north location, there is a pharmacy, and as well as a liquor store that's just around the corner between us and Pop's Pub. We're right connected to a local little pub there as well. And especially in the small towns, like we're right in the middle of everything as far as for what the city looks like, or what the town looks like exactly. And we've never really had any issues whatsoever of complications, loitering, none of that. We haven't seen it to date.
Thank you. Any other questions of council to Councilor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just more of an observation, and maybe Chase can confirm this, that your industry would be sort of synonymous or equal with the liquor sales industry that is controlled through Alberta Gaming and Liquor Control Board. So are they kind of in the same bracket or in the same vein of industry then?
Yeah, it's definitely the same governing body through the EGLC. There's very similar requirements and legislation to go between liquor and cannabis, but since cannabis is still so new and we don't even know if it'll ever will change, our requirements are much more stringent as far as how we can store product, how we can display a product, type of signage, how you can't see in a store, camera equipment. Everything is kind of, I guess the best way to sum it up is it's kind of the baseline of what we're required to would be the liquor, and then everything above that to exceed that is cannabis. So it's, our guidelines are much stricter, advertising pretty much across the board. So it's very similar, I guess, to your point, but it overall it's almost like a completely different ballgame.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any other questions of council, sir, to any of the presenters? And I want to thank the people that weighed in on Let's Connect Coaldale, and also through other mediums that provided their input, you know, the respectful information from the Campbell Clinic and Miss Ramius and all the other members of the community that took time to weigh in and participate in the public engagement of this matter. And I don't see anybody else. Shauna, Lana, do you have anything in the queue that I need to address for people waiting to talk at all?
No, I have nothing, Mayor.
Hey, council, by a show of hands, do you have enough information to make a decision, or before I close the public hearing? So if you have enough information, just raise your hands for me, please. Okay, so I think we have enough information, and there has been good dialogue on the issue. And I want to thank Blaine and Chase and Brad and Shauna and Walter for attending tonight's meeting. And again, for all the public input that has flowed through. And with all that, I will, unless Shauna and Walter, I see you there. Do you have anything else further that you want to say? Okay, all right. That's a handsome young fellow. It's normally you have cats on Zoom videos, but a handsome young man is a welcome addition. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I will close tonight's public hearing on this bylaw, and we will consider it in the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you, council.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Okay, so we are now at a point where we can go to 7.1 of the land use rezoning bylaw 804 P03-21. And I do note that Councillor Lloyd was not able to participate in the first reading of this bylaw, but since she was able to attend tonight's public hearing, she is able to participate in the debate and the decision about this bylaw. Spencer?
Thank you, Mayor. I have no further comments at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions council may have prior to coming to a conclusion on this one.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Spencer, I was just curious about the, and we're still speaking about the cannabis one here, I believe. So.
No, we're not there. No, we're on the rezoning of the highway, the light industrial to highway commercial. So that's.
Yeah, no problem.
I just scooted away to see if I could get some water for this froggy voice, but no luck. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Butch. A virtual drink. That's awesome. Okay, so oh wow, very refreshing. Okay, thank you. And at this point, I would entertain if anybody wanted to sponsor second reading. Councillor Holm makes that motion, and the intuitive person that Cameron Mills is responded to the plea for water, so thank you. We have the motion by put forward for the second reading by Councillor Holm. And are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, I see 7 hands, so that's unanimous. Councillor Pauls, Avery, Holm, Chapman, Simpson, Lloyd, and myself in favor. And we could now entertain third reading if that is your desire. Councillor Chapman sponsors third reading of this bylaw. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that's 7 in favor, and that's Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Avery, Councillor Pauls, and myself in favor. So that is carried. And then now we have 7.2, and that is with regard to land use rezoning bylaw 805 P03-21, and we can entertain for second and third reading if so desired. And we have Cam if you want to make any other comments.
Sorry, you're asking me if I want to make additional comments? No, I guess if there's additional questions or what have you, but I don't think at this point I require anything else.
Okay, and I think memory serves that, okay, Councillor Holm.
I'd move second reading.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to sponsor second reading. Are there any questions? Councillor Lloyd?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It's very sad that the government has made it impossible for small family businesses to survive. I feel really badly for them, and I feel badly for us. We're losing a really, really good restaurant. But I think we need to take the comments from the Campbell Clinic very seriously. For them to take the effort to write a letter and to share their concerns. They're obviously valid concerns, and I think we need to take them into consideration. I will be voting against.
Councillor, okay, Cam, do you want to?
Sorry, yes. So just to address those, and it was interesting because I got the letter from the Campbell Clinic today, and I didn't have the opportunity to speak to them prior to them preparing the letter, but the majority of the Campbell Clinic's concerns have to do with the location of the proposal relative to their facility, right? And the reality is that we have based this application based on downtown being the preferred location relative to other parts of town, and based on the assumption that we can't say no to everywhere in town. And the only locations that fit the regulations that are in place are in fact directly adjacent to the Campbell Clinic, substantially closer than where this application is. They are directly to the east of the Campbell Clinic and directly across the street from the Campbell Clinic. So if council's decision is to vote no on the basis of the proximity to the Campbell Clinic, I would say that the difficulty comes with, we could have an application in 2 weeks' time that is substantially closer, but that also meets the separation distance requirements and is also on Main Street and all the rest of that. So that's part of the difficulty, and that's part of the challenge associated with these types of regulations, is that it's you inevitably end up with sort of a square peg round hole type situation. And unfortunately, administratively, we always try to avoid running into a situation where we're putting the town in legal trouble because we know how expensive that is, which is how we view the no to everything sort of position, if you will.
Okay, and then I see Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Through to Cam as well. This is regarding the rezoning. The the application that's before us, what I'm hearing today, as what I've understood before, is that the restaurant equipment will continue to stay there. So going forward, the venue would change, but it could also go back to being a restaurant again in the future. Is that kind of the thought process? It seemed to me, even from the owners of the restaurant, that they would even look at the future again in terms of speaking from the business perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So to address that, and I don't want to speak too much for Walter and Shauna, but I have had some conversations with them. Again, this process started with them approaching me about opportunities to shift away from the restaurant business. So there's definitely, I think COVID plays a big part of it, clearly. But even in the best of times, the restaurant industry is a difficult industry, especially with people who have young kids. It's late nights, it's constant work, it's difficult. And so the position they've taken is fundamentally one of, regardless of council's decision tonight, there's really no guarantee that 3G continues to exist, certainly in its present form going forward. So this is not a decision on keep 3G or replace it. It is simply a decision of, is this appropriate in this location? With respect to the applicant, my understanding of the applicant's proposal is fundamentally that the kit and the way 3G is laid out, it's sort of a bi-level type concept. The applicant really has a use for the main space, the basement area and the upper area, and the restaurant or the kitchen portion can be fundamentally walled off where the door to the kitchen is located. And there is in fact a separate entrance into the kitchen in the building right now. And so there would certainly be a relatively simple thing to convert the existing kitchen space to one which has a small amount of seating at the front or a bar, certainly as much space as what exists in, say, the Pizza Hut location on Main Street, if not a little bit more. The only thing that would be required for an upgrade to that perspective is they would need to build their own bathroom because, again, the regulations do not allow them to share a bathroom with the cannabis store. They would have to have their own because they have to be completely separate. So what the proponent or the applicant is proposing is to leave that there, fundamentally to wall it off. There's an opportunity for a tenant to lease that space or to take that space back. One of those people who could take that back could be Shauna and Walter. They would simply, they would be paying Shauna and Walter for the space and not using it. I mean, they could theoretically expand into it, but their intention isn't to use it. But Shauna and Walter could always take that back, stop collecting a lease on that particular portion of the building, open up a restaurant, perhaps, something that's a breakfast and lunch type operation that, accommodates better hours and things like that. So certainly all of those options are on the table. There's nothing specific, and it's very difficult for us to sort of mandate what must be with respect to those types of things, because it's very difficult for us to say, well, this is exactly the type of business that you need to seek a tenant for example. But the option certainly seems to be in place, and I sort of take the applicant at face value when they say that that's what their intentions are.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a question for you, Cam. So you brought up the legal aspect of saying no too many times. Have you heard of a community that is not allowing cannabis and has had something filed against them?
No, but I haven't had hours and hours and hours to research the topic, right? We've got a lot going on in town, obviously, but no, at this point, no. And I mean, realistically speaking, we're still relatively new to the industry. So we're only 2 years down that path. I suspect a challenge is coming. And again, I do expect whether council approves this or doesn't, I expect an application to come forward again, perhaps 2 applications to come forward again in the short term. So there's certainly going to be other locations in town that are where we're providing this. It won't be with these same applicants necessarily, with different applicants, but there certainly seems to be substantial demand to come into this market. And the other thing that council should consider is that with the existing regulations, once a single store is approved, then that third buffer would be applied, which should be the 500-meter setback buffer from an existing location, which would provide for the opportunity to sort of limit within the downtown core to a single location. It would be up to council to decide whether or not that's something that you want to keep in place, but it does create sort of another level of regulation over and above that once the first one is approved.
I'll just ask one final question for you, Cam. Under the set for second reading and third for direct control, then both, if a restaurant were to resume or commence once again, then they both would have to still occur under direct control then? Like they wouldn't be applying for like we wouldn't be going back to another zoning control thing.
That's correct. So the way we've written this is now technically this will be a direct control zone, but it will have the same regulations as what is there now, plus allow for cannabis retail sales. So you could still open a clothing store, you could open a restaurant, you could open a lawyer's office, any of those things. You wouldn't require rezoning again. We would simply apply the C1 regulations. We would simply basically allow, add the cannabis retail sales store to that use, and then we would simply give a development permit on that basis. So if someone wanted to switch it to industrial, for example, then it would require rezoning. Probably won't happen.
So then, Cameron, with regards to whatever decision council makes tonight, if, for example, it does pass second and third reading, then some people may say, well, that sets a precedent, and from this day forward, we have to abide by the same setback requirements for the school and the liquor store and the cannabis shop from this day forward. So is that, do you say that we're making a precedent, or my thought on that is that we're not making every application going forward is its own application on its own merits, and the rule of precedence doesn't necessarily apply?
That's correct. So the way I always describe it, because I have these conversations with people in town that come forward and apply, and the way I look at it is simply this. We have the land use bylaw is hundreds of pages long, and it could be thousands of pages long. The reality is that you create all these rules and all these regulations with the absolute best of intentions, but once they're applied to an individual property, they just don't always work perfectly. And that's why it's not simply a checklist and then an approval. That's why it's not a job that's done by robots. It's a job that's done by people, right? And that's allows for consideration of every application based on the unique qualities of every application. The unique qualities of every application being, what does the application itself look like? Who is applying? What are they providing? What do they do? But also, what is unique about this property? So for example, and that's where we look at this and we say, well, again, a strict application of the regulations as they're written allows for it to be, say, on Main Street across from Custom Auto, where it doesn't allow it in this location. However, the intention of the regulations is to limit the amount of, say, kids that are walking by it. And I think it's a reasonable argument to say that there are fewer kids walking by this location, even though it's a little closer to John Davidson School, than would be true on Main Street. And that's where the expectation for council is to consider the merits of each application as it's presented and to make a unique decision every single time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so we've had quite a bit of people weighing in. Is there any other member of council that wants to discuss this before I call the question? Okay, I don't see anybody that has indicated that they have any further questions, and we have the motion by Councillor Holm for sponsoring second reading of this bylaw. And at this time, without any further discussion, I will call the question and ask for those that are in favor. Okay, so then we have myself, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Pauls, and Councillor Simpson that are indicating in favor, and those opposed. Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Avery are opposed. So that carries 5-2. Councillor Holm?
Sponsor third reading.
Okay, Councillor Holm sponsors third reading. Open the floor for any discussion. I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? And we have Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Pauls, Councillor Simpson, and Mayor Craig in favor and opposed. Councillor Avery and Councillor Lloyd, and that is carried. And then now we have item 7.3, land use rezoning bylaw 806 P04 21, and first reading. We have Melanie to introduce that topic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an application that has been made to redesignate the lands legally described as Lot 2, Block 1, Plan 1512220 from the current zoning of Urban Reserve to Light Industry I2. So the applicant has provided a descriptive narrative that has been that outlines their reasons for the request. The applicant has the intention to operate a business, or by its name, Live Electric, to offer electrical services on location and remove an existing dwelling from the site, as well as some other site improvements. So the current use of the property is a business operating as an electrical contractor, and the applicant is proposing to operate a similar use as what exists today. Future intentions of the applicant, if the rezoning is successful, is to purchase additional acres of land east of the property for a potential addition to the existing principal building, which is an existing shop. The subject property is in an area with a mixture of zoning districts. So this includes industrial, residential, and institutional recreational. The list of permitted and discretionary uses in the proposed zoning are considered to align with the properties in the area, with specific reference to 3 parcels located west of the subject property that are zoned as Industry I, which is a more intensive form of industry than Light Industry I2. So council is respectfully requested to vote on the first reading of bylaw 806-P-04-21, as well as council. The recommendation is that council provide first reading and that the land use rezoning bylaw 806-P-04-21 and set the public hearing date and time as May 10th, 2021 at 5:05 p.m. And if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Melanie. Are there any questions of council? So we're here tonight to entertain first reading without debate or amendment. That doesn't mean that a member of council can't vote against first reading, but it can't be amended or debated. So I don't see any discussion. Does anybody care to move for first reading? Councillor Chapman moves for first reading. And I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. That's Councillor Pauls, Avery, Holm, Chapman, Lloyd, Simpson, and Mayor Craig in favor. And the public hearing will be May 10th, 5:05. Okay, and then we have item 7.4, land use rezoning bylaw 807 P-04-21, and that's first reading as well. So did we mix those up, Melanie? I'm wondering. In my agenda we have one north of the tracks, and then we have another one for the electric.
So Mr. Mayor, there may be an error in there. One is supposed to be 806 and the other one should be 807.
So the 806 one that we just passed was what parcel again?
That parcel is for Lot 2, Block 20 plan, or no, that's incorrect, sorry. Lot 2, Block 1, Plan 1512220.
And that is where?
The civic address. Let me just find it.
Councillor Pauls?
That one is,
Right across from the gym.
yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that, because my agenda has a little bit mixed up there. So we just dealt with the one for Live Electric by the old Bill's Electric and Gem Museum. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that for me. And now we're moving on to the next one, 807.
So for this application, again, it is for rezoning to redesignate the lands described as Lot 2, Block 29, Plan 9910549. The current zoning of the parcel is residential multi-unit R2, and the applicant is proposing to redesignate it as commercial C1. So a descriptive narrative has been provided by the applicant, which outlines the reasons for the request. The proposal is to construct, or what the applicant would eventually like to do is to construct a single level building with an attached garage for the storage of company vehicles. And the single level building would operate as an office for the applicant's business. So the subject property is located in an area with a variety of zoning districts. There's urban reserve parcels to the west, and a mixture of residentially zoned properties consisting of residential R1A, manufactured home park R3, and residential multi-unit R2. So the list of permitted and discretionary uses in the commercial C1 zone are considered to align with this proposed use. However, it is important to consider that the subject property is located in an area that's predominantly residential. So council is respectfully requested to vote on the first reading of bylaw 807-P-04-21, as well as a recommendation that council provide first reading of land use bylaw 807-P-04-21 and set the public hearing and date and time at May 10th, 2021 at 5:15 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Any questions to Melanie? Okay. And again, we're at first reading for this bylaw, so council can consider first reading without debate or amendment, but they don't have to necessarily vote in favor of the bylaw if they choose not to. Does anybody care to sponsor first reading? Councilor Avery was up first, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is all seven. So Councilor Roy, myself, Councilor Simpson, Councilor Chapman, Councilor Holm, Councilor Avery, and Councilor Pauls. Thank you. Okay, and then switching it up, we have 7.5. We have tax penalty bylaw 808 C0421, and we have CFO Kyle Beauchamp on the call now. Go ahead, Kyle.
Hey, thanks and good evening, everyone. So at one of the previous council meetings last year, part of the COVID-19 pandemic and relief measures approved by town council, was previously approved to provide some additional time and reduction of penalties on late payment of property taxes. When it was done, there was noted that that was a temporary measure. Any changes back to what was in previously practice, the bylaw would have to come to council again for approval. Back in November and December for budget discussions with council, it was improved in principle to not extend the property tax deadline deferral program. With that being said, this is why this bylaw is being brought back to council. If council is still in the position to extend that, further discussion would be needed with that, as administration has been operating in place that this would not be extended. The bylaw that was in place prior to COVID was a 9% penalty effective July 1st for unpaid taxes, with a 1.5% penalty each month subsequent to that. The COVID relief bylaw move the deadline from July 1st to October 1st and cut those penalties essentially in half. Just an item of note that if a resident is on our TIP program, so our tax installment payment plan, they essentially pay their taxes evenly throughout the year, so from January to December, and they don't have any penalties on that. So for those who sometimes do have financial troubles paying their property taxes, it is somewhat recommended the tax installment payment plan as an option, as that does spread the payment out to the end of the year with no penalties. That being said, we are bringing the bylaw to council for reading to go back to essentially what was in practice prior to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. And it seems that we're moving into an era where, like a year ago, there was a lot of other municipalities and the provincial government online for concessions and whatnot, and there's no real sentiment in that direction by either the provincial government on deferring school taxes or anything. So any other questions through to council to our CFO? I don't see any. Does anybody care to move first reading? Oh, okay. There was, I think I saw Councillor Holmes' hand emerging first, so I'll give it to him. Any discussion? Okay, I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Councillor Lloyd, Mayor Craig, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holmes, Councillor Avery, and Councillor Pauls. Okay, anybody want to go for second reading? Councillor Chapman, any discussion? Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Your Worship. So as far as COVID and COVID relief, because provincially and federally, they're not doing it, is it the right thing that we're not doing it? Things haven't eased up. The province is locked down even more a week ago. And so I think we should be looking more holistically for our ratepayers, not looking what provincially they're doing or federally they're doing. It's what can we do for our ratepayers if we can help alleviate a little bit of stress and pain with monies at this time. So I won't be voting in favor of a second reading of the bylaw tonight, because I believe there's other things and other avenues we can go with giving a little bit of relief rather than interest for late payment.
I'll maybe just kind of touch on Councillor Avery's statement there. So council definitely, if they want to extend the deadline, anything like that, administration would be happy to receive guidance from council on that. A couple of the other amendments, sorry, not amendments, but relief that council has made. 2021, again, we'll see a 0% tax increase on the residential and non-residential side. Late fees on business license were also deferred for 3 months as well. So those are some other measures currently in place. But if council wants to further extend the measures, I'll just leave that in council's option for discussion.
Councillor Lloyd?
Well, I guess we can, oh, thank you, Your Worship. I guess we can always make some allowances for exceptions. Is that possible?
If there was a specific instance or any exceptions would have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, and would have to be brought to council individually. So making exceptions on the case-by-case basis can, while it may help out, leaving that as a broad concept can create a lot of standard setting, and it will create a lot more administrative time in bringing those concerns to council for council's approval as well. So just consideration is part of that.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Kyle, to date, have you had any questions or requests for relief that should be addressed? Well, we won't address them individually, but collectively would indicate that there might be a situation arising.
Today, we haven't received any questions or have heard any concerns regarding anything of that nature.
And Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Kyle, could you remember what percentage or the numbers of people that actually partook in the program last year that we allowed them to defer the taxes? I guess that's question number one. And secondly, you hear the reports from government in the last week or so that especially Southern Alberta has the lowest unemployment rate of any place almost in the nation right now. So I'm just wondering how hard we are being affected down here.
Yeah, so in regards to the first question there, I'll just provide some context to this question. With it being a special situation and not really having some previous knowledge of the best way to administratively run the program, the tax deadline from June 30th was extended to September 30th. We saw roughly about a 40% uptake, or people who normally would have paid by June 30th that had not. For some context though, and we learned from that, the city of Lethbridge said our tax deadline still is June 30th, while we said it was September 30th. But the city of Lethbridge said penalties on late payments won't be charged. To my knowledge, they had received it was roughly between 15 and 20% usage. So their usage was quite significantly lower. I just bring that up in context because when I say 40%, I don't want it skewed that 40% needed the program. I think the way it was just operated, that, it's here, I may not need it, but why shouldn't everybody take advantage of it? And that was within the right, but just some context to that high number there. Regards to the unemployment number, I can't touch specifically on the stats there. We have been working on our property tax assessments and getting tax notices up again. We are seeing non-residential property values continue to rise. Inflation this year is roughly 3%. So talking to our assessors there, while residentials remain roughly flat, 0% kind of inflation there, they're saying the industrial and the business community down here is still increasing in value and coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic on a good footing. That's just context from our assessor to kind of your question there, Councillor Holm.
All right.
Just a quick follow-up question to Councillor Holm. There aren't any assumptions being made that because COVID is, into a second year again, that the town would respond accordingly like last year, or do you feel that there's enough confidence that we can revert to our original plan?
So in the first year or last year, the government of Alberta definitely did mandate that each municipality must put something in place. Town of Coaldale did go above and beyond what was mandated by the provincial government. We do talk a lot about what other people are doing in guidance. To my knowledge, I haven't heard of any other municipality that has been extending property tax deadlines this year. The provincial government certainly hasn't mandated as well. Not saying that we should be relying on what everyone else is doing, but that is just some context there for you.
Okay, and I do emphasize, I agree that Councillor Avery is being empathetic to the situation and that out there. It is different environment, I think, this year. But anyway, I think that what we're going to end up with is the fact that we need unanimous consent for all 3 readings. And I think Councilor Avery is signaling that perhaps that won't be achieved anyway for tonight. So we'll deal with that in a minute. Councilor Lloyd, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. The question, thank you, Your Worship. Is there any way that we can?
You're not, you're on mute. Okay, there you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Your Worship. Is there any way that we can give Kyle and the staff authority to look at exceptions rather than having us make the decision?
Well, I guess there's always, council can direct things. In my tenure as mayor, it's really, I think, a better format to have a broad-based rule for this kind of a thing, rather than having a situation where people pick winners and losers and see who can make the best case for their particular situation. So I think either we have a broad-based a rule that gives some leniency, or we have a broad-based rule that has compliance. Because if we're going the other way, generally speaking, most of the historic responses to one-off requests for tax consideration has not been dealt with in a lenient kind of a fashion, if I would put it that way. So I think what we'll do is we'll okay, Councillor Holm, I see you have one last question to close the debate on your motion for first reading here, or second reading.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess the direction I'd go back to Councillor Avery. Do you have any direction that you would give towards council if this was to be amended to what you would want to see as a penalty deferral?
Thank you, Councillor Holm. I like what Kyle was mentioning. We keep our tax date at the end of June, but look at decreasing the penalty for this year.
Okay, so we do have the motion for, can you remind me, Lana, who made the motion? Councilor Chapman moved for a second reading, and we've had discussion, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is 4, and then against is, okay, so we have Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Pauls, and myself in favor, and against we have Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Simpson, and Councillor Avery. So second reading does pass, and for us to continue tonight, we have to consider unanimous consent. So anybody want to sponsor that motion? Councillor Pauls, thanks for that. And we have the motion for unanimous consent sponsored by Councillor Pauls, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, it's that, so then myself, Councillor Holm, Councillor Pauls are in favor, and opposed. And that's Councillor Simpson, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, and Councillor Avery. So that fails. So we will have to entertain the third reading another time. And filed in for logistics, you probably need this to come back at our next meeting in April so that we can have a timely discussion and communicate what we're doing for the ratepayers. That is.
Yeah, we will bring this back for the next council meeting. Maybe just look for, there has been, kind of to Councillor Avery's comments, some discussion about the deadline, whether to keep it or not. You know, we can bring the bylaw back as is or bring suggestions, just maybe looking from a little direction as what council might want to see. I have no problem bringing the bylaw back the way it is, but then I don't want to be kind of stuck in a situation where council had maybe expected to see options. So some just guidance there would be appreciated.
I agree. Does anybody care to make a motion that might direct the administration on what they might like to see if it isn't the way this bylaw is read? So I think Councillor Avery spoke to being more in favor of last year's approach that the city of Lethbridge took with regard to keeping the deadline the same and a little leniency on when the penalties kick in. Is that the direction you'd like to take, Councillor Avery?
That's correct.
Okay. Would that be your motion to direct the administration to bring that back as one of the options?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Avery. Any discussion? Okay, we don't have any discussion, so I think with that motion, if it passes, then administration can look at that, and then also what it looks like to pass third reading as well. So I'll call any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Councillor Avery, Councillor Falls, Councillor Holm, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Lloyd, and myself. Okay. All right. Then we have item 7.6, land use rezoning bylaw 809-P-4-21, first reading. Spencer Croyle.
Thank you, Mayor. So as mentioned, this is land use rezoning bylaw 809-P-04-21. This bylaw has been prepared for the redesignation of a specific portion of lands described as legal subdivisions 4 and 5 within the quarter described as the southwest of 15-920, from the current zoning of urban reserve to institutional recreational. The property in question makes up a part of the town's multi-use rec center development area, as well as the area for the recently funded replacement school for Kid Andrews High School. For a variety of reasons that will be beneficial to both projects, the location of the school and rec center has been adjusted slightly within the quarter section. The adjustment has moved the project area north and west of where it was originally conceptualized by approximately 200 meters. And if Lana, you can put Schedule A of the proposed bylaw up on the screen, we can see that area as shown. It's approximately 213 meters in width, running east to west, and 472 meters in depth, running north to south. That's about 25 acres in size. And it starts from the northeast corner of the property that was legally described. So in the earlier stages of both projects, the site for both facilities was entirely within the east 80 acres of the subject quarter section. The east 80 acres was designated institutional recreational in 2018, while the west 75 acres was zoned urban reserve. Both of these do with the annexation proceedings, and after annexation, the rezoning of a number of properties in the town that had just become a part of the town. So one of the main reasons the application or the rezoning proposal is coming forward this evening is that either land use district, urban reserve, or institutional recreational is suitable for multi-use, their multi-use recreation center. Only institutional recreational allows for the school. So as I had noted above, there were a variety of reasons for the slight adjustment to the location of the rec center and school within the quarter. The primary reasons for the adjustment include ensuring the most efficient use of infrastructure as it extends west from 16th Avenue, and to locate the project in a way that allows for the best connection to the constructed wetlands from a visual and functional perspective, functionally as a passive recreational amenity and as a component of the school's learning environment. So ultimately, as project planning has progressed, this could be seen as one of many steps necessary to get closer to the actual construction of the multi-use rec center and the school facility. It's worth noting as I conclude here that the area shown, the 25 acres that's the subject of the proposed bylaw this evening, is not the footprint of either one of the projects in question. It's a conservative understanding of the boundaries of the site that may be necessary for the school and rec center, including things like sports playing fields, parking areas, and related features. So really it's just being conservative to ensure that we have all of the land that needs to be zoned institutional, recreational, zoned institutional, recreational to allow for the project to proceed in terms of the correct zoning being in place. Council is respectfully requested to vote on first reading of the bylaw this evening, and as per the requirements for the land use redesignation proceedings, a public hearing is proposed to be held on May 10th at 5:30 p.m. I have 5:05 p.m. in the report. However, recognizing there are two other bylaws that will have public hearings attached to them for the May 10th meeting, I would suggest that instead that time be amended to 5:30. That's all I have for now, and I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Yeah, I'll open the floor to council for questions through the administration. So I just reiterate that your one point that this isn't necessarily pinpointing the actual school site in this bylaw. It gives a bit of latitude for practical purpose on the actual construction of the school, and there was no prior communication that really would be considered misleading on where we were going to put the site or anything like that in our prior stuff at all. And this is just an adjustment to facilitate construction and proper planning.
Yes, that would be correct, Mayor. And I could also highlight that as further development and further detailed planning takes place for the remainder of the quarter section, the future properties surrounding this site will help to more specifically define the boundaries of the school site and recreation center as more is understood regarding how the remainder of the quarter will develop over time.
I saw a question by Councillor Lloyd. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that if somebody has a question, I just think it's pretty straightforward. I'd make the motion for first reading.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Councillor Lloyd for first reading, and with understanding that if passed, the bylaw would be May 10th at 5:30 p.m. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried unanimously by Councillor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Simpson, Lloyd, and myself. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have item 7.7, Community Standards Bylaw Amendment 810-R-04-21. And I believe we have Chief McEwen to present on that. Thank you, Chief.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Craig, and good evening to council. So my staff report tonight is to talk about the community standards bylaw and some proposed amendments to it regarding open burning. So April 1st, 2021, just a couple weeks ago here, was the deadline for allowing open burning in the annexed lands with an approved fire permit issued by the fire chief or designate. So now further directions required from council to determine if a further extension is warranted to allow open burning in the newly annexed areas within the town of Coaldale. So this matter has appeared before council previously. It was before council on June 25th, 2018, when council approved first reading of the community standards bylaw. At that time, there were some amendments and provision made for open burning in the areas annexed, and as well as how fire permits and fines were handled. On July 9th, 2018, the bylaw returned to council for second and third reading. The wording at the time and what went into the bylaw was effective April 1st, 2018, annex lands with approval of a town of Coaldale burning permit issued by the fire chief or designate shall allow open burning outside of item 506, which deals with fire pits and backyards in the town, for a period of 3 years ending April 1st, 2021, or as otherwise directed by council. So, as former Lethbridge County residents, landowners in the annexed areas were allowed to burn burnable debris outside of a fire pit in accordance with the Lethbridge County Fire Permit Bylaw 1424, and to accommodate and ease the transition of being annexed into the town of Coaldale, where open fires outside of an acceptable fire pit are not allowed. Council made provisions to allow open burning in the annexed lands for a period of 3 years. Now that time has come, further direction from council is required on how to proceed. Fire department identified the amount of development in the annexed areas as of April 1st, 2021 as a factor to consider when reviewing if the time frame should be extended to allow open burning. So given that the annexed areas look substantially similar now to when they were annexed into Coaldale, an argument could be made that an extension to the deadline of April 1st, 2021 is reasonable. So some things to consider with this is there really has been no development into the annexed lands as of April 1st, 2021. However, of course, there are plans for future development, so school rec center for one, and residential in other areas. But the school rec center will be hundreds of meters away from the nearest acreages. And several landowners have expressed that they would appreciate an extension to the timeline. One landowner in particular has many elm trees that need to be dealt with, and burning is the most cost-effective way of destroying the trees and to help prevent Dutch elm disease. Landowners rely on burning to manage deadfall and burnable yard debris. And one thing to consider for town residents is the air quality and sometimes nuisance smoke that could come from open burning. Financial impacts on this, primarily staff time. There's minimal staff time required to manage the permitting process. It's fairly straightforward, doesn't take a whole lot of work from our end. However, considerable fire department time and resources could be required, you know, if we had to go out and extinguish one of these fires that either got out of control or they did not meet the permit or bylaw. So I've had a couple private conversations and emails from landowners about this, mostly stating they would appreciate an extension to this. So that kind of brings a couple options. And option one, that council provide an extension and amend section 502 of the community standards bylaw to continue open burning in the annexed lands for X amount of time would be whatever council determines, with a reassessment to occur once this extension has lapsed. And option two, that council provides first, second, and third reading to amend community standards bylaw 810-R-04-21, section 502, to continue to allow open burning in the annexed lands until any new developments, primarily residential, are approved within their respective quarter section of land in accordance with the town of Coaldale annexation map, which was attached to this report as well. And for clarity, area C and B on the town of Coaldale annexation map will be considered one area. And that would be the area with the acreages along 18th Avenue, and then the section of land where the rec center and high school is going to be going. Option three, that council prohibit open burning in the annexed lands as of the date of expiry, being April 1st, 2021, or that council direct administration with an alternative option not listed above. So my recommendation is the option two. And option two is recommended as it balances the needs of the residents in the annexed lands and knowing that development may not occur in all the areas for some time. And also understanding that there will be a point where annexed landowners will have to comply with the current town of Coaldale regulations around burning at some point in the future. So therefore, option 2 allows landowners to continue burning until such a time where new development builds out near their property. This should also set a clear path forward rather than reviewing extensions or having to approve burn permits on a case-by-case basis. Once development is approved for an area primarily focused on residential, the property will no longer be able to conduct open burning and will have to comply with the fire pit requirements under the community standards bylaw. And that is it. There is the map attached for the annexation area and the changes to the community standards bylaw in the package as well too. So happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for that report and the work done on that. Is there any questions through to Chief McEwen? Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess there's reasons, Kevin, why you don't want to have an extended date. You'd like to leave it open-ended. Is that correct?
Through to Councillor Lloyd. Yes, that's correct. Just fine if we set a date, then we will constantly be having to review it and update the bylaw as required to set a new date. So if we kind of leave it open and base that on development rather than a finite date, then I think it's a little bit easier going forward. And it kind of sets a clear path for the landowners to know that, okay, once there's development slated for my quarter section of land, then the privilege of open burning stops.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. And through to the Chief, obviously in your bylaw, it's very clear already that the town of Coaldale's fire ban bylaw would trump what we would be trying to do.
Sorry, Councillor Chapman, I just missed the last bit of that.
Yeah, just for clarity's sake, that our town of Coaldale burning bylaw would trump anything that even in the annexed lands, I guess.
Through to Councillor Chapman, thanks for the question. That's absolutely right. As soon as the town of Coaldale puts a fire ban on, there's no open burning allowed anywhere in that annexed land.
Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that we go with option 2, that the council provide first reading of this.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion for first reading. Any discussion? Okay, I see none, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. Councillor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Simpson, Lloyd, and myself in favor. Councillor Holm?
I'd move second reading.
Okay, any discussion to Councillor Holm's second reading motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. I believe Councillor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Lloyd, Simpson, and myself are in favor. And we can entertain unanimous consent. Councillor Lloyd sponsors the motion for unanimous consent. Call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Councillor Lloyd, Simpson, Chapman, Holm, Pauls, Avery, and myself. And now we can entertain third reading. Councillor Chapman, all in favor? And any opposed? Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. And Councillor Lloyd, were you in favor? Just want to clarify. Councillor Lloyd was in favor. Okay, thank you. So that was Councillor Avery, Chapman, Nome, Falls, Simpson, Lloyd, and myself in favor. Thank you, Chief McEwen.
Thank you very much, Council and Mayor.
Okay, and then you have financial update, item number 91. Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, thanks everyone. So we do have the fourth quarter financial update here. Just a little context why we're calling this the fourth quarter update. Currently Avail LLP, our CPA auditors, are currently working on our year-end financial statements. Those will be ready for council's review at the next council meeting. Before we get to that though, we do have a little bit of housekeeping. Part of this report, when we do have a year end, usually municipality will have either a surplus or a deficit, and council must look at what to do with those figures there. Sometimes you do have amounts that have already been budgeted or approved as part of the budget process, but sometimes they'll change and other items come up. So that's why it's the main context of this report. Past the staff report, there is essentially an income statement and a list of the capital projects that does have the actual amounts versus the budget, with notes and for context as to what happened relating to the variance. I'm not going to get into those specifically in this report. However, once I'm done, if there's any questions on any of those items from council, be happy to entertain those. So back when we did the operating capital budget worksheet or workshop, we had at the time projected a surplus that would be allocated for operating and for capital budgets. So the operating surplus we had allocated or estimated was roughly $400,000 as part of the COVID relief measures. We also projected a surplus of roughly $1 million that would be allocated to various capital projects. That estimate was a conservative estimate. So overall, we're about $600,000 previously described to council. But again, those were conservative numbers that we used at budget just because the end of the year was not complete. Something did change. So with that all being said, the surplus for the town of Coaldale for 2020 is projected to be just a shade over $2 million. So when looking at $2 million, administration looked at the capital projects, operating needs, and we have a proposal of the best way we believe is to allocate those funds. You see on the staff report here, some of those are for projects that have already incurred and some are for future projects here. So I'll just get into these projects here. The pathways and trails expansion, so just under $680,000 allocated to the recreation reserve for that. The reason we're doing that is this was a previously budgeted program. However, we're just slightly changing the allocation of reserve funding between this program and our sewer lagoon upgrades, just as it fits the programs a little better than was previously budgeted. You remember from the council session with the operating and capital budget, we had previously allocated these funds to the sewer reserve. So we're just kind of switching those there. It's not any more or less money in the pot, it's just simply an allocation between the two projects. The 7-Eleven building, this was a item that council had previously approved the purchase. However, the initial list price was approximately $900,000, and there is quite some uncertainty as to what the actual cost of that was going to come in at. Because of that, we didn't allocate a specific funding source for that purchase. Now that we do have it, it was purchased substantially less than the list price of $900,000. We do need a measure to fund that, and that would be through this surplus. The $405,000 for the mill rate stabilization fund. These funds are included in our operating budget for the next 3 years to kind of help the town of Coaldale balance part of the budget for lost future revenues, largely being due to interest investment income from lowering interest rates. Completion of 8th Street North. $216,000. Originally, when this project was budgeted, it was half was to be funded through debt financing and half was funded through grants. Later, it was determined that the paving for this project and asphalt would not be an eligible expense under the grant because that the grant funding is by that amount lower than we had anticipated. As a result, $216,000 allocated to that project. Additional $200,000 allocated to the funding to complete the fire hall project. $61,000 of this was previously approved by council in regards to the concrete expense for the upgraded topping. $77,000 had related to a mediated settlement for phase 1 of the project. And the balance of $62,000 is expected final cost overruns on the project. Just a shade over $60,000 for the study of 21st Ave and Orlando Lakes Drive for the intersectional design enhancements. This was previously completed and presented to council as my understanding. This was a project that kind of was started and completed and presented to council with no formal funding allocated to this project. So that's why we're presenting to allocate it through our surplus this year. For 2021, we have $50,000 requested for a pedestrian overpass study connecting North and South Coaldale. And finally, $8,000 for furniture and fitting for the fire hall for 2021. So what you see here is we're taking the surplus and we're allocating it directly back into capital projects into the town of Coaldale. We're not padding any additional items. However, we're just putting them towards items of need and items that have already been occurred and funding needs to be allocated to these projects. Further going into the staff report here, there's also a slight surplus from projects that were budgeted but did not occur or were completed in the year. These projects, since there was an operating expense tied to them, we need council's formal approval to carry forward the expense to a subsequent year. So we have 3 projects here. The sewer relining program, that's a project that they had done some preliminary work and tendering has gone out for that project, and that will occur in the near future here. So we're just simply allocating those funds, be further allocated to that reserve, so that funding isn't lost and it can still be allocated to that previously council approved program. The final upgrades to the Centennial Pathway, $55,000. Funding was received from that in the year. However, that project will be happening this year. And finally, $30,000 for the safety grants. While those funds were essentially spent in 2021 due to warranty on the project, it didn't become an expense until 2021. That's why we're asking council to approve carry forward of the project. With that being said, so we do have the recommendation to council then to allocate the surplus to those various projects. Again, going forward into the staff report here, we do have the statement of operations detailing the variances between revenues, expenses, the expenses as a whole, and as the capital budget there. Again, I won't go into each of those as there is quite a bit there, but however, if council does have questions on any of it, I'd be happy to entertain that. With that being said, I will turn it back to council.
Thank you, Kyle. Is there any questions of our CFO, Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Your Worship. So looking at the sheets provided, I'm unclear, Kyle. So we've got our town office or civic square, and we're of course got money in the budget yet for this year. We've got the 7-Eleven project or that lot. Where did we put, or wouldn't that be till this year, the expense of the building that's on the 7-Eleven building and the cost of like, or that this year expenses, the tearing down, the demolition and the moving of Westland and stuff?
Yeah, so the cost to tearing down the 7-Eleven building is included in the cost of the 7-Eleven line item there. So that is the purchase cost and the demo cost. So that is all in one. The cost for the Westland building, that's not specifically on this list, just kind of due to how our accounting works under the standards. So with that being said, that building is a temporary building on there, and it will eventually be repurposed or resold for a different usage. Because of that, on our financial statements, it won't be allocated as a capital project. Rather, it will be allocated as a other asset that is held for resale, because in the long-term future, the intention is that project will either be repurposed or resold. That doesn't change those funds are still allocated to the Civic Square budget. So it's not changing or increasing or decreasing the budget. Just based on the future use of that project, that we don't anticipate that we're going to own it in the long-term future. It's just allocated differently for accounting purposes. So even though it's not included in the Civic Square budget as you see here, it eventually will be. It's just how it's treated under the accounting standards.
So when the whole project is done, then there'll be a profit or a loss on that facility. Is that correct then?
Yeah, essentially. So I believe the cost for that right now is, I don't have the exact number, but it ranges somewhere between 150 and 200,000. So that right now is will be allocated to the Civic Square budget. If that is sold or repurposed in the future, the proceeds on that sale will be allocated back to the Civic Square budget. So it all stays under one umbrella. So it's possible that there could be a loss or a gain from the resale of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of council? Well, thank you very much for providing that update. That's very comprehensive and informative, Kyle. Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of surplus funds as noted by administration. And it was a well done report. Thank you, Kyle.
Okay, we have the motion by Councillor Simpson. Any discussion? I don't see any. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Councillor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Lloyd, Simpson, and myself in favor. Thank you again, Kyle. And then we have item 11.1 is a letter that was issued back following all of our last meeting to seek more clarity in the urgent care at the Coaldale Healthcare Unit. So that has been dispatched for councillors' edification there. So a motion to receive that for information. Councillor Simpson, thank you. All in favor? Okay, and that's okay, and that was all unanimous, I think. So I see Councillor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Lloyd, Simpson, and myself in favor, unless otherwise corrected. Okay, so that's unanimous then.
I have a
And
question.
go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So we have no recourse at all. It's just a done deal. There's nothing we can do to keep our urgent care.
But the purpose is to seek more clarity on this.
Okay.
Because the last response that we got was very ambiguous, saying that, you know, that everything that was happening there was relative to COVID-19 protocol and restrictions. And so he wanted more of a long-term vision response back from Alberta Health on the facility. And hopefully that they will acquiesce to a request to attend one of our meetings, probably via Zoom, I would imagine, but. Okay. So then we have 12.1. Land, I think, oh no, we have 12.1 is the open book demo, and we have Kyle back with that. Thank you, Kyle, for coming back.
Yeah, I won't take too much of your time here. So over the past couple of years, so since 2019, administration has been looking at ways we can improve internally how we budget the budget process and just basically from a technical standpoint, using old Excel spreadsheets and whatnot was not efficient. We've moved to using a platform called Questica Budgets to help our internal budget process. With that in mind, we have added what's called Questica Open Book. Questica Open Book is basically an interactive tool that anyone can access online, and it does contain detailed financial information, budget information, capital projects, and other information that we do include on that site. So this is all information that has previously been presented to council through department reports, budget updates and whatnot. We're not presenting any new information here. Rather, the intention is to consolidate the information to provide residents and stakeholders and businesses an opportunity to view it all in one platform, in some interactiveness, and perhaps a little easier to view it. So that's it. I'm just going to share my screen and just do a quick run through here. So can everyone see that?
I can.
Okay, so the link to this is in the staff report. You can go through it now, and it is live. So I won't go through all these, but you see the first few ones here. We have detail about the town's capital projects, followed by the operating budgets. This capital projects is fairly cool because what you do is you click on it. It has all the capital projects on the left here, but it also has an interactive map. So if you can see, you can hover over each one, and it does bring up the projects. So here we do have phase 1 of the pathways, Malloy phase 2B. Here we do have the joint rec center. We do have highway landscaping. So I'm gonna, just for context here, if I click on the pathways one, I'm gonna click on Malloy, there we go. So I click on the Malloy project here, and it brings up where we've added some context, the description of the project. You see there is the budget for the project to happen. Obviously, this project hasn't started yet, so the total projected cost to complete is still 3.1 budget per year. And finally, it does have a breakdown of the various funding sources for this project. So it basically allows anyone on this to take a look at the capital projects that council's previously approved, see where in Coaldale they're happening, and get detailed financial information. This will be updated throughout the year based on actual costs and progress as they do is made. So for example, the arena floor and dasher boards, as that project is updated, you will see new costs added to that and possibly new pictures. So residents can actually see visually what is happening with the project. The other one I'm kind of explore here, we do have information about our operating budget that was recently approved. So we do have the option to see this in a variety of information or options. Currently, we do have the operating budget broken down by department. So if I click on operations here, a total of 6.9 million. It breaks it down further into sub-departments. So I can go into roads, and then it breaks it down based on the type of expenses. So salaries, utilities, contracted services, debt payments and transfers to reserves. This does break down further, salaries, benefits, seasonal wages, WCB. So it does break down like that for each column. I am also able to kind of go backwards here. So operations budget, kind of toggled here on the top left, or sorry, the total budget for Coaldale. Salaries and wages is budgeted at 6.1 million. Clicking through that here, I can now see how that is allocated to each department. Again, you'll see on the left here, it does have budget and it does have actual. We haven't been able to upload any actual costs yet, but again, this will be updated throughout the year, so residents can essentially go into our balance sheet and income or our income statement accounts and see what the budget is and what amounts has been spent each year. So they can do this as they please. Those are the two big ones there from the budget perspective, and I won't go into the other ones, but just kind of a quick context of what we do have here. So we do have details of allocation of tax dollars, how each, how $100 of your taxes are allocated. 23% goes to the Alberta government for education, 16 for roads, streets, police takes 11. So as you can see, people can go through this, look on their own time and kind of dig into the information to see some useful stuff here. We do have information on historical tax rates for the town of Coaldale, historical property assessment. So how has Coaldale grown throughout the year? You're seeing 2015, our non-residential tax base was 72 million. At the end of last year, it was $125 million. So it has grown quite significantly. Furthermore, there's information, a topic that residents and businesses want to see is, this is what we're spending now, but how do we look into the future? We do have future projections here of our cash reserves, future projections of our debt levels, debt limits, and then followed by just some municipal data here. So municipal data on emergency service calls, development in our census. So how have these progressed over a certain period of time? So again, anybody can go to this website right now, coaldale.openbrook.quersica.com, and look at this on their own. So I'm going to stop sharing and just turn it back to council.
Well, all I can say is, wow, that's pretty impressive that people can access that kind of information. So does that populate manually, or as people enter in the different financial software of the town, does it update almost automatically?
Yeah, it's something that as administration, we have to run the processes to have it update. So, but again, that's something that, once we have our timeline figured out internally, if we do it, it likely would be a monthly or, once we have our month end done, that we upload this data that residents and businesses and stakeholders can see the updated data.
And Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Kyle, that's great. I'm just really impressed with this. Is there a link from our website to go to that, or do we have to actually log in on that site, on that?
Yeah, we don't have a link embedded on the website right now, but we have been working kind of with the communications team as the best way to get this out and get the information out. So I do suspect that will ultimately happen. It's not there right now, but hold tight, it most likely will be.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a quick question there. Great site there, Kyle. And I can't remember what we expensed that project to be, but is there a lot of admin time that is required to populate that?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of work to get the program set up. Once it's up and running, though, there isn't a lot of maintenance required from it. So administration wise, we do our work as far as recording our costs, updating our budget software, and then it's fairly easy to update this on a regular basis. So with that being said, there isn't a lot of work to get the information out to the public. So we can hopefully expect to have expedient information out and regularly updated for the public.
Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Worship. Kyle, how do you plan on marketing this? Can we get like a full page in the Sunny South News, or just so that people can be made aware of this?
Yeah, one of the best approaches that we do have, and I haven't confirmed this with our communications team, but one of the best approaches we do have is every month residents get a utility bill. There's usually information, our newsletter in there. So it's an avenue that we're gonna look at to adding this to that, so residents can see that. Other alternatives to the Sunny South News or social media and whatnot will be used. We do see this as quite a useful tool to distribute already available information. So we're going to make sure we pump up the gas and get the good news out on this one.
Kyle, with this, this is amazing software, and it is very informative and transparent. So then if a resident or business person was going through this, is there a link to communicate and say, oh, I noticed that this line or this item was this, and why is it that way? Is there going to be a two-way dialogue, or is it all just one-way dialogue on this?
Yeah, I just noticed the other day that at the top right-hand corner, there is a little feedback button there. I don't know exactly what that does, but I think that might be an option. We do also have the ability to, update the cover page where it is, if residents do have questions that they can email. But I think the feedback here will actually create a dialogue between the resident and the town directly. I do have to look into that though, but then there will be something.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for all the work on that, and the initial work of populating all that information. It's going to be, hopefully we'll be able to do a nice big announcement when it's fully up and running. A motion to receive that for information. Councillor Lloyd, all in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. Councillor Pauls, Avery, Holm, Chapman, Simpson, Lloyd, and myself. And then now, Lana, election 2021.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you. I just did a short brief report just to inform that the nomination booklets are available in paper format at town office should anyone wish to come pick one up. It's also on the website. On our homepage, there is a link button on there that you can download it, and it is a fillable form. So if you prefer to do that from your home, you're welcome to as well. I did not include it in the package, just given that the booklet itself is another 37 pages. So I just wasn't trying to add to the volume of the agenda in its entirety, but I did include the link there and just some brief information, but I'm happy to answer any questions now or at any time if anybody has any, or any residents that are interested in submitting their nomination or inquiring to do so.
Okay, thank you, Lana. Any questions through the Lana? Okay, a motion to receive that for information. Councillor Avery, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Councillor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Lloyd, Simpson, and myself. And it appears that we're at the end of the public portion of the meeting. And so with that, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Chapman moves us into closed meeting. All in favor? Okay, so we'll, that's unanimous. Councillor Avery, Pauls, Holm, Chapman, Simpson, Mayor Craig, and Councillor Lloyd. So thank you very much. And we'll see you in the next meeting.